In this video, let us render out some elements from Maya for our matte painting. Now, I have already gone ahead and modeled the base. As you can see, it is extremely basic geometry or polygonal modeling techniques. For one of the sides, I have the step-by-step iteration on how I worked on it. So let me isolate one. You can see it was extruded off a single cube, similar to the back side. Now in the next step, I have added a few more subdivisions and even the middle section. Heading over to the third one, you can see that I'm starting to make some changes to the overall design. Now the base is much wider. Now at this stage, I'm just trying to get a good silhouette. And that is the final design I came to. Now I have included this file for you guys to go ahead and play with. Let's head over to our base. Hit F on the keyboard to zoom in. Now, similar to the last model, even this is extremely simple. I started the base by just cutting a sphere into half and then scaling and extruding it out to the desired shape. And later on, just used simple modeling techniques to add some sort of edges or pillar details in it. I have also gone ahead and added extra subdivisions along the edges so that when I smooth it, the shape holds up. There you go, you can see the extra subdivisions along the edges. Hitting the 3 key on my keyboard to smooth it. Now, as for UVs, overall, I've kept the UVs really simple. We don't want to get into too much unwrapping detail because we're just going to be throwing a texture on it. So let's head over to our scene. So I've already gone ahead and made a basic scene setup, selecting the camera, heading over to the attribute editor. Now this camera has already been set up similar to the film back of a Canon 60D, and in the image plane I have the matte painting output from the previous lesson applied in it. Now going into my perspective view, here we can see it. There's a big plane, the barrier, and there is our sci-fi base. Now the overall scale I am using here is 1/10. That is the decimeter scale. So heading over to my hypershade. Now my texture setup is very simple. We are going to go over and paint these in Photoshop, but for now we just need some sort of a texture coverage on it. So both of these are V-Ray materials, and let me show you the textures connected. Before that, let's go over the overall shader properties. As you can see, there is nothing very different in it, just some basic reflection and texture maps, similar to the other one. Heading over into Photoshop, you can see this is the texture I made. This is painting around in Photoshop for about 5 minutes just to get a random tiling texture. Now, the next thing to talk about is lighting. So we're going to use an image-based lighting setup. Now, in the V-Ray Dome, I have an HDR, which I shot at Lake Louise, and it's also been balanced. That is color corrected, and going into the dome texture, that's where I have plugged that in. Under the viewport display, let's click on enable to just show you guys what the HDR is. There you go, it's the same location. And on the rectangular light, what I've gone ahead is remove the sun from the HDR and plug it onto our rectangular light. So going into Photoshop and taking the exposure slider down, you can see I've removed the sun from it, and that has been applied onto the rectangular light. So I can go inside of Maya and adjust both my bounce light and my direct light independent of each other. Now let me switch off the viewport display. Zoom out. and show you my outliner. Now for the base, I've added a V-Ray displacement node properties, and going into those properties, we have the displacement switched off. But instead of having any displacement, we are just going to be using that for its subdivisions. So let me scroll down. That's displacement to none. And maximum subdivisions to 8. Now one thing we need to do is to have different parts of our geometry have different RGB values in a matte pass. So that is going to help us ahead in selecting them. That is, we don't have to go ahead and start making masks in Photoshop. We can just quickly use the RGBA pass to select and isolate certain elements. So just to show you what these properties are, I've selected the dome, and scrolling down to the extra V-Ray attributes, that is set to 1, the flat base to 2, and the rest is set to 3. So plugging these into a matte pass, we're going to get RGB values for 1, 2, and 3. So next, let's talk about our render settings. So using V-Ray here, having my render size same as that of the matte painting, using the V-Ray VFB, and image format is a multi-channel EXR. Over to the V-Ray tab, I'm using my minimum shading rate of 2, disabling my filter for now, and subdivisions between 1 and 50. Type linear multiply, and mode has don't affect colors, that is only adaptation. I'm not using GI for now, and in my settings, I've just changed the region to 32 and dynamic memory to 8000. Now render elements. Now we are going to be rendering out different elements to help us composite them in Photoshop. Now in a V-Ray extra text, I have the V-Ray dirt to generate some ambient occlusion, then a lighting, matte shadow, multi-matte set to our 1, 2, and 3 objects, and finally a reflection pass. Now before we can render this out, we need to hide our geometry because we do not need the front plane and the barrier, and go into our camera, into the image plane, and disable the display of this image. Now that's done. Let's go ahead and hit render. So our render is now complete. Let me go through the passes with you. First is the RGB color, followed by alpha, multi-matte. Our geometry has been divided into the RGB colors, followed by lighting, reflect, matte shadow, and our dirt, that is our ambient occlusion. So between this and the next lesson, I'm going to go ahead and compile all these passes into a single PSD and convert it into 16 bits so we can use it into our matte painting. So let's pick it up then in the next lesson.